Virginia Gamba, Special Representative of the Secretary General to Children in Armed Conflict. Welcome to Al-Arabiya.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here with you.
Thank you, ma'am. I'd like to speak about Yemen. And the coalition, in many people's eyes, do not deserve to be on that list, whether it's A or B. Of course, they're listed in the Group B of countries which are, and parties who are trying to do something to deal with the problem of children in armed conflict. But they have contributed a lot to the safety of the children. They are in history, many people, many experts say, they've never seen a campaign to liberate, for example, Al-HAJ, accompanied with such a humanitarian effort to save lives of the civilians, to provide them with food, i.e. the humanitarian effort and campaign going hand in hand with the military effort to liberate Hodeidah. However, they found themselves again on the list. And in spite of all the donations they gave with the Emiratis, with the Kuwaitis, to the United Nations to help the Yemeni people. How do you explain that?
To answer your question, Yemen, the government of Yemen is listed under B. For many years they were under A. And the reason for that is that we have been engaging very much with the government of Yemen, the legitimate government of Yemen. We have been engaging very much with them to put in place measures. They have issued command orders. We're starting to work with them. So it's in recognition that measures are starting to be developed, that they have been shifted from A to B. In the case of the Coalition to Restore Legitimacy in the Yemen, they had been listed last year. They had been listed in List B because they had put in place measures at the time when the Secretary General was deciding on the listing, that convinced him that they merited to be listed in the List B. For Yemen, you have got a number of listings. The Houthis are listed, mostly for recruitment and use, killing and maiming, and attacks on schools or hospitals. You have got Al-HAJ operating in Yemen that's also listed. There's a couple other parties that are listed. These ones are usually on A because they're refusing to talk to us and they have put no measures in place. In List B, there are two, which is the Coalition to Restore Legitimacy in the Yemen and the Yemen government, because they are putting in place measures to reduce the number of victims and to protect children better. As a result of that, they were able to literally 2/3 of all violations in relationship to attacks on schools and hospitals are directly related to the measures they put in place. They've been able to stop that.
Spoke about the SG acknowledgement of the positive impact of the coalition, considerable efforts to protect hospitals and schools and infrastructures.
Yes.
But why are they still listed?
Have been delisted completely over attacks on schools and hospitals.
Killing and maiming.
Yeah, they continue to be listed.
They explain that the Houthis are the ones who are recruiting these children, pushing them in the battlefields. And if a child starts shooting at you to kill you, I would assume that you will shoot back to protect yourself, and this is your right of self-defense. So the Houthis are the ones who are violating the child's rights by recruiting them at the age of 13, 12, and even less to fight a war. And even now at Hodeidah, they're bringing them from Sana'a, children, to fight the war, or use them with their families as human shields. Why don't you take this into consideration?
But what we have, they are listed, and they're listed in List A because they've taken no steps towards fixing that.
I mean, with regard to the coalition who are protecting themselves.
The coalition continues to be listed in List B because the numbers directly attributable to them last year, 2017, do not merit at this point the listing. The way that we don't have a chart that is a mathematical chart on numbers, what does and what does not. Even one death, even one killing is too much. We all agree on this.
That's correct. Yes.
So I think it has to do much more with proportionality. It has to do much more with the scope and the projection of the numbers in relationship to the state of the conflict. It's a very important point.
But the coalition has dealt with it with their communique or statement on Wednesday night, saying that these numbers are exaggerated. They're challenging your numbers, and they're challenging also the sources of these numbers. What do you say to them?
We agree to disagree with them. They have the right to say what they wish to say.
Let me ask you another question. When these numbers are tabulated during the year, all through the year, Are you in touch with the coalition? Are you transparent with them? Are you putting them in the picture? How these numbers
Absolutely.
are tabulated?
Absolutely.
And what sources are you using?
Absolutely. No, everybody.
But they're challenging these sources.
Yes, but let's go down a
Yes.
little bit, or
Yes.
one notch.
Yes.
If we're looking to see a substantial and significant decrease in the number of violations, it doesn't mean that the Secretary General will wait until there's 0 violations to the list. I think a case in point is schools and hospitals. The monitoring mechanism is good enough that we were able to document a substantial drop from the moment the new forms of targeting were put in place. Not only that, we continue to verify, even in the beginning of this year, to see if that trend continued lowering. And it has, which has given him the opportunity to delist on that one violation. In relation to killing and maiming, it is not happening either as fast or as extensively as we would like to see.
Okay.
The numbers have gradually decreased every year for the last 3 years, almost by half, except last year. Because of the last quarter, they met the same levels of the prior year.
But the problem is that as long as the Houthis continue to recruit children, and this is a problem you acknowledge in your report, as long as they push them to the battlefields, these fatalities between children will continue because the Houthis are the cause of it. I'll move to another point. With these children, when they are captured, the Saudis and the coalition forces have done a lot to reintegrate them into society again and send them back to their families. What happened? They come back as soldiers because the Houthis force their families and force these children to enlist again. What can you tell me about the efforts you witnessed by the coalition to reintegrate the children?
I have met a couple of times with the Salman Foundation to look at their operations and the way that they are engaging in this
You mean
sense.
the King Salman Center?
Yes, indeed, indeed. And they have become little by little almost a referral of a model that could be followed by other countries. In fact, I'm very interested in keeping a close communication with them because I have 20 situations they might become, if their models succeed better, they might become some type of referral. So I think on the only issue with reintegration is very interesting, is you need a standing operating procedure to have a standard for the handover or release of children. You also have to give anonymity to those children. So there were some issues that were occurring inside Yemen on reintegration efforts that were not following the correct procedures. Those issues we have corrected. We have worked together both with the Yemen government, and now we're proceeding also to work with the King Salman Foundation, so that when they operate not just with the heart, but also with the head and by the rule. And so in that sense, I have nothing to say. I think it's a very good effort. But let's go back to the main point. You know, children are being used and abused by all parties to conflict. And particularly armed groups, and particularly very violent armed groups, are not just, they're not just causing children casualties because of the indiscriminate way in which they use force, but they are more and more relying on children to become tools of war and for them to continue being strong. What we're noticing, this is not Yemen, it's across the world, and mostly in Africa and in the Middle East. What we're seeing is that as governments, forces try to control these very extreme violent activities by these armed groups, they succeed. They start to succeed. As soon as the group feels itself being weakened or has been kicked, let's say, out of a region, they remaster, and one of the first things they do is they forcibly recruit more children into the ranks. But let's go to the elephant in the room. All right? I do not accept, I don't think it would be either wise or true to accept that every child killed and maimed in Yemen was in a combatant mode. Some might have been combatants at the time of that strike, but it doesn't explain the large number of girls that are killed and maimed. But let's say a lot of these combats are done in urban environments. So it might well be that, and that's something that we've seen very much in the issues of schools. If a school is used by an armed group as a military base and it becomes a military target, then clearly we do not consider that an attack on education, because it's but it shouldn't happen, but it does. So I dispute the general comment that all the children killed and maimed in Yemen are all necessarily recruits
But in
of the
every
Houthis.
war, you know that, Under-Secretary
Yes.
Gamba, in every war, children and what they call collateral damage fall by the sideway. In every war, and it's not done by purpose. The Americans done it in Afghanistan in huge numbers. The Russians have done it in Syria and doing it still. The coalition in that war on terror did it in Iraq and in Syria. It happens, but they're not listed. But they're not listed in your report.
I don't have verified numbers on those actors
Maybe
that you're talking
maybe you don't
about.
have enough staff then to do this report
Of
in
course,
a just way.
Well, no. I believe the report is entirely just. I believe it's objective. I absolutely respond to the monitoring and reporting mechanism. I will agree with you that we are underfunded and under-resourced, and we also have a lot of times access problems to operate in areas controlled by armed groups.
So people get away with murder.
No, people don't get away with
Not
murder.
people, but
I have to say,
even governments. I mean, the bombing in Afghanistan, the bombing in Syria, it's all open to see to everybody. I mean, and there are children and civilians and women and men fallen civilians, falling by the sideways, and they call them collateral damages. I had this conversation with Donald Rumsfeld during the bombing campaign in Afghanistan. He said, yes, civilians do die.
so then you agree with me that the only solution for this to stop is for there to be peace. So we need to find for peaceful solutions to conflict.
No, my problem is that some countries are listed and some countries are not and get away with it because you don't have enough staff, you don't have presence on the ground. And it's valid argument.
A valid argument
it's
is
not
that
fair.
we could do more. A valid argument is that we could do more. And we could do more if we had more access and more resources. I am very heartened by the efforts and the future of reintegration that is being posited by the King Salman Foundation, because I don't think they're taking such a light approach. I think they're going to go for long-term assistance, as it should be done. But this should be applicable to all the countries, not just Yemen.
Yes, Palestine. In your report, you said the following, and I'd like to read from the
Yes, sure.
report, that you called upon the government of Israel to draw down on international juvenile justice principles. You called upon them to reconsider the use of administrative detention for children, refrain from the use of solitary confinement for
Yes.
children,
Yes.
and from encouraging children to act as informants and ensure that detention is used only as a last measure, and to prioritize alternative to detention of children, and that in a way there are so many things wrong
Yeah.
that's taking place.
Yes.
Can you understand the perception of double standards in the Middle East? And that has been going on for years, for 50 years. For 50 years, children and civilians have suffered under the Israeli occupation. And if I may, I spoke to the Palestinians Authority, and I was able to obtain, I'm sure you have them, and I'm sure you can obtain them, and I'm sure your offices, UNICEF and the special coordinator and others on the ground can give you these figures and can authenticate them. Since 2000, only since 2000, 2,050 children, 2,050 children have been killed. Detention, month by month, I have here the figures, hundreds are detained, children, which are not under international law, as you called upon them. And all this did not merit the enlisting of Israel in A or B list. Why?
Well, I would have to then go back to the description of the year that was. We cover January to December.
We had 50 years of this
Yes,
streak.
but I don't cover 50 years. I cover 1 year at a
Are
time.
you telling me that the other undersecretaries for children in armed conflict didn't do their job?
No, I'm not saying that at
So
all.
why the
I'm
UN
sorry
has
that
not
at all.
enlisted?
Well, you know, let's try to be, I have to try to be professional in respect to this issue. I have to talk to what I cover, and I cover a monitor and reporting mechanism with verification of issues. All of last year, between January and December, it was a plateau where I can tell you off the top of my head, there were at least 1,000 children absolutely detained. There was also a lot of children injured. There were no maimed, or there were 15 deaths. That you know, and it is
We just
reported.
said one child is too many.
Yes, and there were 15 deaths indeed, 5 of which occurred in stabbing incidents. So again, it's very hard to look at that. In some cases, there was a child killing a child. So it's difficult. It's difficult to put in perspective. But again, detention is not a violation that is listable. But my office is doing more, perhaps, than it's warranted to try to continually warn. Everything you read is personal letters and meetings I have had pushing every 2 months on this issue. So for last year, simply the matter unlistable was not there for last year. I am very concerned from December of last year onwards, and I'm monitoring very carefully. But why are people so angry? And I'll tell you why. Because usually people don't have an idea that what you are reporting upon is a specific moment in time. And they're seeing things evolving that might have a huge peak of violence. They will see that in the description in next year. So what I'm saying is, I understand people are frustrated. I understand the nature of the conflict. It's a very difficult conflict. It's a very intractable conflict. It's a very bad situation. There's one hell of a lot of suffering. We understand this. And my job is to raise awareness early of the excessive use of force and very violent environments. What I have been seeing through my office in the first quarter of this year is scary stuff. So as such, I am warning all parties to refrain from the use and abuse of children, to refrain from the type of activities we're seeing. And we're doing it through these means, but we're also doing it personally. So whatever happens next year, it will reflect the verified violations of 2018. And that will be next year's report.
I know and you know that Israel's name and Hamas' name came up for listing, and through intervention by the Israelis and by some superpowers, they were removed before the publication of the report a few years back. So political pressures and superpowers' influence play a part in this. And to be completely frank, this really gives a strong perception of double standard in this organization in our area.
Yeah. Well, I can't accept, at least in my docket, even the assumption that we have a double standard.
I hope not.
And not in my office. I do not believe, and it's been a year I've been on the job, and I can safely say that I have not received any order, either from the Secretary General or any threat from any party as to the substance of my thing. I have received demarches, I have received comments, I have met with all listed parties that I could reach that wanted to meet with me, and we have engaged in discussions. I have offered technical assistance to all of them so that they can beef up the protection of their children. And we will continue to do that. If we can save the life of one child, for me, it's enough.
It's worth it, yeah.
I'm only thinking of the children. The politics behind it I am not interested in. And I will not allow the report to be politicized.
What are you doing concerning the Russian planes that continue to bomb in Syria, civilian areas, in the name of fighting terrorism, and where civilians are killed, including women and children? Is your office doing any effort to accumulate data about?
We don't have a single verified incident related to these actors that you say in relationship to Syria last year. Now, let me also use the opportunity, if you allow me, to use your meet, because the more we can advocate, the better. It is appalling what is happening in the Syrian Arab Republic. It is appalling. And not only did we finished last year appalling, if you look at the numbers, you will see in the report how appalling it was, and the number of parties listed, all on list A. None of them are talking to us. None of them are taking measures.
But not listing Russia.
But you are trying to push me in a direction that is not that I don't want to go. I'm telling you, I don't have a single verified incident attributed.
Are you trying to get information?
Of course we're trying to get information. We're all the time trying to get information. And I cannot tell you the amount of effort we put in trying to get information and the circumstances we are in. But I want to talk about Syria. It is really not possible that at the start of this year, we're seeing not just new armed groups appearing, not only that, but the ability to move across borders is growing, And we're seeing recruitment, a peak this year is starting with a peak of recruitment of children as young as 10 by almost all actors. So we haven't yet seen the worst of this for children. This year...
And the government's playing a big part of the violations.
The government, all its affiliated forces, all its associates, all of the ones that are militias.
You have a very difficult and unenviable job. We wish you the very, very best. I feel your sincerity and I feel your compassion. I thank you for this interview.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for helping me get the voice out.
Thank you.